If you're over 50 and you've been waking up bloated, sluggish, or with that strange heaviness in your stomach that makes you dread the morning, I need to tell you something my grandmother told me when I was a young doctor, still convinced I had all the answers. She said, "Sarah, it is not only what you eat, it is when you eat it. And what you eat at the wrong hour becomes poison by midnight." I remember looking at her, this woman who was 87 at the time, sharper than most of my colleagues, cooking her last small meal before the sun was even close to setting. I dismissed it then. I was trained at Hadassah Medical School in Jerusalem. I had 40 years of clinical experience ahead of me. What could my grandmother Rachel, a woman from Łódź, Poland, who never went to medical school, possibly teach me about metabolism? Everything. She could teach me everything. Because what she practiced instinctively, what she learned from her mother and her mother before her, what Jewish women have done for thousands of years in kitchens from Warsaw to Brooklyn to Tel Aviv, is now being validated by researchers at Harvard Brigham and Women's Hospital and the National Institutes of Health. Today, I am sharing with you one of the most critical of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity that I have spent 40 years documenting. And specifically, I am going to tell you about 3 foods that you must stop eating after 6 in the evening. These are foods that most women over 50 eat every single night without thinking twice. And I will show you exactly what they are doing to your body while you sleep. Toward the end of this teaching, I will share something my grandmother only revealed to women she truly trusted, a small evening ritual she practiced every night for over 60 years, that I believe is one of the reasons she lived to 98 without medication until she was 90. Let me take you back to a Friday evening in Brooklyn. I was maybe 12 years old. The apartment smelled like challah and roasted chicken. My grandmother Rachel was standing in her kitchen, and she had these notebooks, old, soft-covered, filled with her handwriting in Yiddish and Polish. Some of the pages were stained with olive oil, some with turmeric. Those notebooks were her life's collection of what she called the kitchen wisdom, the things her own mother had taught her about keeping a family alive and healthy through the worst decades of the 20th century. On this particular Friday night, I watched her serve the main meal early, well before sunset. The chicken, the vegetables, the rich dishes, all of it came out before the evening prayers. And then later, after Shabbat had begun, after the candles were lit, when most families I knew would still be eating heavy food and dessert late into the night, my grandmother served only a small cup of broth, maybe a few slices of cucumber with salt, maybe a spoonful of tahini with lemon. That was it. I asked her why. She looked at me and said something I have never forgotten. She said, "The body does its sacred work at night, Sarah. When you fill it with heavy food after the sun goes down, you interrupt the repair. You interrupt the healing. The body cannot clean and rebuild if it is still working to digest." She was not quoting a medical journal. She was quoting a tradition that traces all the way back to Maimonides, the great physician and rabbi of the 12th century, who wrote in his Mishneh Torah that a person should not retire shortly after eating, but should wait 3 or 4 hours, and that one should always begin with the lighter food and finish with the heavier. Maimonides was not guessing. He was documenting what Jewish communities had practiced for generations, the principle that the evening meal must be the lightest, the simplest, and the earliest. And today, over 800 years later, science has a name for this. They call it chrononutrition. Before we go further, I want you to type something in the comments. Type the words, "I honor my body's rhythm." Just those 5 words. Because the first step in every one of the 7 laws is intention. You cannot change what you do not first choose to see. Now, let me be honest with you about what is happening in the bodies of women over 50 in this country right now. because the numbers are alarming and no one is talking about them in the way they need to be talked about. Researchers published data showing that metabolic syndrome, that dangerous combination of high blood sugar, excess belly fat, elevated blood pressure, and abnormal cholesterol, now affects roughly 31% of women globally, with rates climbing significantly after menopause. For women between 55 and 64, the prevalence is even higher. Harvard Health published a report just recently explaining that women seem to hit an inflection point in their risk for insulin resistance right around the age of 50, because the drop in estrogen and progesterone that comes with menopause shifts the way the body stores fat, concentrating it in the abdomen, which is the most metabolically dangerous place it can go. So here you are. You are doing everything your doctor tells you. You are trying to eat well. You might even be exercising, and yet the weight around your middle will not move. Your sleep is broken. You wake up at 3 in the morning and cannot fall back asleep. You feel foggy by 10 in the morning. You reach for coffee just to function. You go to your doctor and your blood work comes back fine, and you are told this is just part of getting older. But it is not. It is not part of getting older. It is the result of a metabolic system that has been disrupted. And one of the biggest disruptors, one that almost no one is talking about, is not what you eat during the day. It is what you eat after 6 in the evening. Researchers at Brigham and Women's Hospital, in a study led by Dr. Nina Vucevic and published in Cell Metabolism, found that eating just 4 hours later than usual significantly increased hunger hormones, decreased the number of calories the body burns, and actually changed the way fat tissue stores energy at a genetic level, turning on the genes that promote fat storage and turning off the genes responsible for fat breakdown. This was not a questionnaire study. This was a controlled clinical trial where participants lived in a laboratory under constant monitoring. The results were clear. Late eating does not just add calories, it fundamentally changes your biology. And for women over 50, whose hormonal landscape has already shifted, whose insulin sensitivity has already declined, this effect is magnified. You are not failing, your timing is failing you. My grandmother Rachel understood this without a single blood test. She practiced it every day of her life. She kept her evening meals small and early, not because she read a study, but because the tradition she inherited, the tradition that runs through the Torah, through Maimonides, through thousands of years of Jewish life, encoded this principle into the rhythm of every single day. What I discovered is that this is not an isolated problem with an isolated solution. It is one piece of a system that Jewish women have carried for 3,000 years and that I have spent 40 years documenting into 7 laws. Let me tell you where this particular wisdom comes from. In the book of Leviticus, the Torah lays down the laws of Kashrut, what we may eat, what we may not eat, and the principles of how food interacts with the body and the soul. For centuries, scholars and physicians in the Jewish tradition have interpreted these laws not merely as religious commandments, but as a system of health, a divine dietary code. Maimonides, who served as personal physician to the Sultan of Egypt and was simultaneously one of the greatest rabbinical authorities of the medieval world, wrote extensively in his Regimen of Health about the timing and weight of meals. He prescribed that the heaviest eating should happen when the body is warm and active, and that the evening meal should be light. He wrote that overeating is like poison to the body, and that most illnesses are caused either by harmful foods or by filling the belly beyond what is needed. What makes the Jewish approach different from modern dieting advice is this: it does not ask you to count calories. It does not ask you to restrict entire food groups permanently. It asks you to align your eating with the rhythm of the day, the rhythm of the week, and the rhythm of the body. It is a system of timing, not deprivation. And this is what the field of chrononutrition is now confirming. that the same food consumed in the morning and in the evening produces entirely different hormonal and metabolic responses. Your body does not process a piece of bread at noon the same way it processes that same piece of bread at 9 at night. It is not the food, it is the hour. Today I am sharing one of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity. This is Law 3, the law of clean foods, as it applies to the evening hours. It is one that most women over 50 have never heard explained this way. And once you understand it, you will see your evening routine very differently. Here is the first food you must stop eating after 6 in the evening, and I know this will be difficult to hear because it is deeply embedded in the culture of comfort. It is refined sugar. Dessert after dinner, the cookie with tea, the bowl of ice cream on the couch, the chocolate after the meal. My grandmother Rachel had a phrase for it. She would say, "Sweetness before sleep is sweetness stolen from tomorrow." She never ate dessert after her evening meal. Not once in all the years I knew her. When she wanted something sweet, she ate it in the morning, a piece of fruit, a spoonful of honey in her tea. When the body, as she said, was still open. The science now tells us exactly why she was right. After 6 in the evening, your insulin sensitivity drops significantly. Melatonin begins to rise as the body prepares for sleep, and melatonin directly inhibits insulin secretion from the pancreas. So when you eat sugar late at night, your body releases insulin into a system that is already becoming resistant to it. The glucose stays in your blood longer. It circulates while you sleep. It triggers inflammatory responses. It disrupts the deep stages of sleep where cellular repair and memory consolidation happen. For women over 50 whose insulin sensitivity has already declined due to hormonal changes, eating sugar after 6 is like pouring gasoline on a fire that is already burning. And I want to be clear. I am not talking about natural sugars in a small piece of fruit eaten early in the evening. I am talking about processed sugars, refined sweets, the desserts that have become the ritual ending to the American dinner. In the Talmud, in Tractate Bereshot, the sages discuss the order of blessings over food, and there is a principle woven throughout that the body has a natural hierarchy of reception, and what enters the body must match the body's readiness to receive it. Sugar after dark violates this principle on every level. The second food is one that surprises many of my patients when I first tell them. It is heavy red meat, a thick steak for dinner, a large portion of beef or lamb eaten at 7 or 8 at night. Now, I am not telling you to stop eating red meat entirely. That is not what the tradition teaches, and it is not what the science demands. But there is a deep wisdom in how Jewish dietary laws structure the consumption of meat. In Leviticus, the Torah specifies which animals may be eaten, and the laws of Kashrut impose a discipline and intentionality around meat consumption that most modern eaters have lost entirely. Maimonides wrote that one should always begin with the lighter food and finish with the heavier, and his guidance made clear that heavy animal protein should be consumed when the body's digestive fire is at its peak, during the middle of the day, not at the end. My grandmother followed this instinctively. When she served meat, it was always at the midday meal. By evening, the table held broth, vegetables, eggs, maybe a small piece of fish. The science behind this is now well established. Red meat takes between 4 and 6 hours to fully digest. When you eat a large portion after 6 in the evening, your body is still breaking it down at midnight, at 2 in the morning, at 4. Your digestive system is working when it should be resting. Your core body temperature remains elevated, which disrupts the natural drop in temperature that triggers deep sleep. And perhaps most importantly for women over 50, the research shows that late-night consumption of heavy proteins can elevate levels of inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein, particularly in individuals who already have some degree of metabolic dysfunction. But there is a second part to this law that my grandmother always taught alongside it. A specific way she prepared her midday meat that she believed made it more digestible and more nourishing. Without that preparation, she said, even the right food at the right time is only half as effective. I will share that in a coming teaching. The third food is refined carbohydrates: white bread, pasta, white rice, crackers, the starchy side dishes that fill the typical evening plate. In Proverbs 17:22, we read that a cheerful heart is good medicine. But there is another verse in Proverbs, less quoted, that speaks to the discipline of the mouth and the belly. The sages taught that bread is the staff of life, but that the staff must be held at the right hour and in the right measure. My grandmother baked bread. She loved bread, but she ate it in the morning and at midday. By evening, bread left the table. She replaced it with vegetables, with olive oil, with seeds and herbs. She would say, "The body does not need building materials at night, Sarah. At night, it needs quiet, it needs space, it needs to sweep the house clean. When you eat refined carbohydrates after 6 in the evening, you create a rapid spike in blood glucose at precisely the time when your body's ability to process that glucose is at its lowest." The research in chrononutrition has shown that identical meals consumed in the morning versus the evening produce significantly different glycemic responses. A bowl of pasta at noon might raise your blood sugar modestly and your body handles it efficiently. That same bowl of pasta at 8 at night can produce a glucose spike that lingers for hours, suppresses growth hormone release during sleep, and contributes to the cycle of fat storage and morning fatigue that so many women over 50 describe to me. This is not about eliminating carbohydrates from your life. It is about respecting the body's clock. The tradition of Kashrut at its deepest level is not a list of forbidden foods. It is a system of alignment, aligning what you eat with when you eat it, and aligning both with the rhythms of creation itself. I want to share something personal here because I would be dishonest if I did not tell you that I learned this lesson the hard way. At 45 years old, I was a practicing physician. I had credentials, I had patients, I had published research, and I was falling apart. I had fatigue so deep that I would sit in my car in the parking lot after clinic and not have the energy to drive home. I had brain fog that made me forget the names of medications I had prescribed for 20 years. I had gained weight around my middle that would not respond to anything I tried. And every night, after a long day, I would sit down to a late dinner, pasta, bread, sometimes a dessert, because I told myself I deserved it. I had earned it. That meal was my comfort at the end of an exhausting day, and it was destroying me. It was not until I went back to my grandmother Rachel's notebooks, those stained, soft-covered pages filled with her handwriting, that I found the answer. She had written in Yiddish a simple line that I translate as, "The evening table should be a whisper, not a shout." I followed her guidance for 90 days. I moved my heavier meals to earlier in the day. I stopped eating refined sugar, heavy meat, and processed carbohydrates after 6 in the evening. I replaced my evening meal with broth, vegetables, olive oil, and herbs. The biblical foods, the ancestral foods, the foods that Maimonides himself would have recognized. Within 3 weeks, my sleep returned. Within 6 weeks, the fog lifted. Within 90 days, I had lost the weight that had resisted every other intervention. And I understood finally what my grandmother had been trying to tell me my entire life. These practices do not work like pills. They work like a garden. All 7 laws together, tended with consistency. The world we live in today, with its 24-hour food delivery, its brightly lit kitchens, its culture of late-night snacking, is more misaligned with the body's natural rhythm than at any point in human history. The ancient Jewish tradition structured life around the rhythm of the sun, the rhythm of the week, the rhythm of the seasons. Shabbat itself, the seventh day, is a law of rest, embedded into the very architecture of time. And the dietary laws were never separate from this architecture. They were part of it. When you eat heavy food late at night, you are not just making a nutritional mistake. You are breaking a rhythm that your body was designed to follow. Let me leave you with this. There are 3 things I want you to carry from today's teaching. First, refined sugar after 6 in the evening is working against your insulin sensitivity, your sleep quality, and your cellular repair. And for women over 50, this effect is magnified by hormonal changes that are already in motion. Second, heavy red meat consumed late at night forces your digestive system to work during the hours when your body is meant to rest, repair, and regenerate. Move it to the midday meal, as Maimonides instructed, as my grandmother practiced, and as the tradition has preserved for centuries. Third, refined carbohydrates in the evening create glucose spikes that your body cannot process efficiently after dark, contributing to the cycle of weight gain, fatigue, and broken sleep that so many of you have described to me. This knowledge comes with a responsibility. In our tradition, the body is not yours to neglect. It is a gift given to you in trust. Tzelem Elohim, made in the image of the divine. To care for it is a sacred act. Shmirat Haguf, the guarding of the body, is not a suggestion in Judaism. It is an obligation. What you eat matters. But when you eat it may matter even more. In my next teaching, I will share another of the 7 laws, one that connects directly to what I have taught you today. It involves a practice that most women over 50 have been doing exactly backwards without realizing it, and it has to do with the first 30 minutes after you wake up in the morning. When you understand this law alongside the one I have shared today, the effect on your energy, your clarity, and your metabolism will be something you feel within days. If this teaching spoke to you, I ask you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next. Share this with a woman you love, a sister, a friend, a daughter, because this wisdom was never meant to be kept by one person. It was meant to be passed from woman to woman, from mother to daughter, the way my grandmother Rachel passed it to me in that small kitchen in Brooklyn. Write in the comments what you are going to stop eating after 6 tonight. Tell me. Let me hear from you. Because when you declare your intention, you set the change into motion. As we say in our tradition, the act begins with the word. Until next time, Lachem to life.